received an email recently that brought me back to the earliest days of making content on this page. The days when the theories that I explored had yet to be even thought of, a time when timelines could be stretched and shrunken at will to try and make the most interesting, fun thought experiments seem realistic. A time when we dove into the etymology of individual characters' names and talked about the possibilities of the people and places they could have come from. A wild time in the YouTube landscape where we had to fill the holes that Naruto had left behind in its own story. Because when I opened my email today and received an email from a man by the name of Spencer George titled Namikaze Name Origin, in a matter of moments I was teleported back to 2021. A young balding Nick crafting theories about the idea that Minato could possibly be Tsunade's son. Nowadays, when we theorize about the Naruto universe, we theorize about what's to come in the Boruto universe. For all I knew, I'd flipped every stone, explored every possibility, broken down every name. But today, Spencer George has proven to me that that chapter of my life is far from over, because I believe this email from Spencer George has cast me in the direction of figuring out just exactly where Minato and the Namikazes come from. Finally answering the question, why didn't Naruto's grandparents step up to raise him when his parents passed? And once and for all, putting a rest to an idea that somewhere out there, a Namikaze clan filled of yellow flashes of the leaf is simply waiting to be discovered. Yes, today, gentlemen and gentlemen, I genuinely believe we have cracked the code of all things Minato. Not only answering the question of where he came from, but also what his clan is up to and why they weren't around for Naruto. And apparently, the truth simply lied in his name. So with no further ado, let's get directly into the truth about the Namikaze clan. But before we get to unveiling any truths, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Woo! It feels good to be back, baby. Oh my god, I feel 3 years younger, but my back still hurts. So before we dive into this theory, I want to establish why we're talking about it in the first place, and why it's important to know this kind of information. See, for as long as Naruto as an IP has existed, people have asked the question, why wasn't Naruto raised by anybody? The usual question is, why wasn't Naruto raised by Hiruzen, or Jiraiya, or even Kakashi? However, some people take this conversation even one step further, asking the question of why didn't Naruto's extended family step in to raise him? Now, in the case of his extended Uzumaki family, the explanation is rather obvious. The Uzumaki, by the time that Naruto was born, were gone, minus Kushina and Mito. Kushina was brought to Konoha, kind of against her will, when she was in a Shinobi Academy age range, somewhere between 6 and 8 years old. Now, this would mean that Kushina was brought to Konoha a couple of years after the conclusion of the First Great Shinobi World War, as Kushina and Minato are the same age, and we know that Minato was born about 6 or so years after the conclusion of the First Great Shinobi World War. And after Kushina was brought to Konoha, presumably the only Uzumaki who was brought to Konoha, even though the Uzumaki had a very strong presence in Konoha with all of their Uzumaki temples that Orochimaru raided in the lead up to the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, the entirety of the Uzumaki clan was eradicated, either by the combined forces of the other 4 ninja villages, not including Konoha, or possibly by Otsutsukis, depending on which theory you believe in, but we don't necessarily know who killed them. We just know that they were exterminated in their entirety, and only the Uzumakis who were living outside of the village hidden in the whirlpools, like Nagato, Nagato's parents, Karin, and Kushina, survived. Now, and thus, as Kushina was brought to Konoha without her parents at an incredibly young age, that means that she was not only able to avoid the Uzumaki massacre, but also that her parents almost definitely died in it, making Kushina at the age of 8 or so an orphan. And thus, if we wanted anybody from Naruto's mother's side of the equation to step in and help raising him, unfortunately, Uzumaki's not the mother for that to happen. However, that same question does still exist for Naruto's father's side of the equation. As well, the Namikaze clan are a seemingly unknown clan that apparently only consists of Minato, as Minato is the only confirmed member of the Namikaze clan we know to exist. That does mean that technically we also have no evidence that there isn't more Namikaze out there. See, because while we can point at the Uzumaki clan and say, oh, they were wiped out because their Fuinjutsu was too powerful and everyone was afraid they would monopolize the power of the tailed beasts, we can't say, oh, the Namikaze clan were also wiped out because their kids were fast. And as the great Samuel Jackson once said, the absence of evidence does not mean the evidence of absence. However, everything that we know about Minato seems to point in the direction that Minato was born in Konoha. One, Minato is never really talked about in the same way that Kushina is talked about. That is to say that the anime never talks about Minato being an immigrant who had to migrate into Konoha Konoha like they do with Kushina. Now, technically with Kushina, this is kind of only a talking point in the anime, as the manga makes a way smaller deal out of the fact that she moved to Konoha as opposed to being born there. And the anime doubles down in this circumstance by saying that Kushina was treated like a second-class citizen, as Kushina believed that when she was kidnapped by shinobi from the Hidden Cloud Village that nobody was going to come look for her. But in the manga, it's immediately established that a search party was sent to go find her. It's just that Minato was faster and more well-versed in tracking. However, in both the manga and the anime, Minato is never talked about in this capacity. On top of that, we know that Minato was in Konoha when he was very young. According to most timelines, graduating from the Shinobi Academy at 10 years old. And if he spent the standard amount of time in the Shinobi Academy that most shinobi do, which is 4 years, that would imply that Minato probably enrolled in the Shinobi Academy when he was about 6. On top of that, we know that Minato was enrolled in the Shinobi Academy before Kushina, and Kushina migrated to Konoha when she was very young, so Minato's very clearly been there for the vast majority of his life. But if Minato was born inside of Konoha, where are his parents? Why didn't they help raise Naruto? Shouldn't they have been treated like some kind of royalty on account of the fact that they made the 4th Hokage the youngest ever person to take the throne? Well, in response to that series of questions, I would have to say the most logical answer to come to here is 1, either they're not in Konoha, or 2, they're gone. And the real kicker is both of those answers might be correct. Because 1, the evidence that I've found not only points towards the idea that the Namikaze are a clan that does not exist in the Land of Fire, but 2, that they're no longer with us. And to substantiate that evidence, we're gonna have to dive into the name Namikaze. Now, mind you, this is the part of the video that Spencer provided me with the evidence for. Some etymological research that I am going to be stealing and inserting into this video. However, the extrapolation on this etymology is my work and my work alone. And that is why I'm a pro. Anyways, the crux of Spencer's theory is that the Namikaze clan is a clan that exists on the coast of the Land of Wind. And immediately, this is actually kind of where I disagree with Spencer, but he gets back on track here in a second. See, for those of you who don't have the Naruto map memorized, 1, what are you doing? And 2, you won't know that technically none of the major countries border each other. Land of Fire, the Land of Wind, the Land of Stone, the Land of Lightning, and the Land of Water all do not border each other. In between each and every single one of the major countries and their major hidden villages exist 10 or so smaller countries. Whether those countries be the Hidden Rain, the Land of Hot Water, or the Land of Rivers, all of these smaller countries act as buffers between these warring larger states, which is really bad for the smaller countries. It's actually what the entirety of the Second Great Shinobi World War is about. But where are Spencer and I extrapolating this idea that the Namikaze clan are from a coastal city somewhere either in between the Land of Fire and the Land of Wind, or in the Land of Wind? Well, that extrapolation comes from the word Namikaze itself. See, as we all know, within the confines of Naruto, names mean a lot. The Senju, a name that breaks down into 1,000 tasks, are well known for being able to accomplish basically anything when it comes to abilities and powers. They're as good as Taijutsu as they are at Kenjutsu, as they are at Genjutsu, as they are at Ninjutsu. The Uzumaki, a name that means spiral in Japanese, are from the land of the whirlpools. Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru are all named after characters from a Monogatari from the 1500s, who they are all based on. You can be told basically everything that you need to know about every single character of import in Naruto simply by knowing their name. And therefore, if you take that mentality and stretch it over to the Namikaze, Namikaze as a clan name can be broken down into 2 words: Nami and Kaze. Now, Nami in Japanese means one of 2 things depending on context. Either wave or sea. This is why Nami from One Piece is called Nami. She's their ocean navigator. And Kaze means wind, which is why the Kazekage is known as the Kazekage, because they are the leader of the hidden village in the Land of Wind. And therefore, with a name like Namikaze in the world of Naruto, that would lead one to believe that the Namikaze, like the Uzumaki, would be for a place known for its connection to the ocean and its wind. Which is where Spencer gets the idea that the Namikaze were a clan that existed on the coast of the Land of Wind. That is to say, the place where the Land of Wind met the ocean. And that is a fair and well-argued point. After all, the Land of Wind does have a massive stretch of coastline that is 100% completely unexplored. In fact, we never really explored the coastline of either the Land of Wind or the Land of Stone. And while we do briefly touch on the coastline of the Land of Lightning, the Land of Water, and the Land of Fire with the Land of Waves, both the Land of the Wind and the Land of the Stone never have their coastlines explored in any capacity whatsoever. So if a clan was to exist out there, we really wouldn't know about them. And so the idea that the Namikaze exist out on the Land of Wind, and that's why we've never seen them, isn't a bad theory. But the idea doesn't align with other substantiative evidence that I've found. But it's a good starter idea. On top of this starter idea, there's also the fact that Minato's name, Minato, also means port in Japanese. And just like that, Minato's actual name in English means port, ocean, breeze, which seems to elucidate the fact that Kishimoto was hinting at Minato's origins coming from somewhere around in the ocean area. And while Konoha absolutely has a ton of coast, and therefore Minato possibly could have come from that coast, it would make sense that if Minato's family moved from the coast into Konoha, that once again his family would have been around for Naruto. And before we go any further, I know there's going to be some people out there who are going to go, oh, well, maybe Minato's parents didn't know about Kushina being pregnant. I mean, the idea that Minato and Kushina were having a child got swept under the rug pretty well, as nobody was able to guess that Naruto was the child of the 4th Hokage, so maybe even Minato's own parents didn't know. And while that is technically a possibility, it's one that I hate. There are so many instances of Kushina walking around the village very pregnant with Naruto, and a lot of people acknowledge that she was pregnant. On top of this, a lot of people did know that Minato was Naruto's father, they just didn't tell it. But okay, Nick, so if Minato's not from the coast of the Land of Fire, and he's not from the Land of Wind, where are he and the Namikaze from? Well, the answer is a bit more nuanced, and because of that, it makes a lot more sense. See, wedged between the Land of Fire and the Land of Wind is a relatively large, small country. In fact, it might be the largest of the small countries. And this is a country which canonically exists in the Naruto universe, as it's been placed on every single Naruto map we've ever received, but a place that's only ever explored in filler arcs. And that country is the Land of Rivers. And the Land of Rivers is a legit country with its very own hidden village. Or at least, it used to be. See, because nestled within the confines of the Land of Rivers for a couple of decades existed a town by the name of Tanigakure, also known as the village hidden in the valleys, also known as the Hidden Valley Village. So if you're looking for ranch, apparently that's where you go in the Naruto world. However, an interesting thing about Tanigakure is the fact that 30 years prior to the beginning of Naruto's series, it was wiped off the map. Now, that marker of 30 years prior to Naruto's story is interesting. One, because it's estimated that just about 30 years prior to Naruto's story, the Uzumaki Massacre occurs. And two, the Massacre of Tanigakure happens after Tanigakure and Konoha sign a ceasefire. However, rather interestingly, this ceasefire doesn't necessarily align with any of the great Shinobi World Wars. See, 30 years prior to the events of Naruto would mean that this ceasefire between Tanigakure and Konoha was signed when Minato and Kushina were 6 years old. Minato and Kushina died at 24. 24 minus 18 is 6. Now, like we already said, 6 years old is the lower range age estimate that we hypothesize Kushina migrated to Konoha at. As we said that she migrated to Konoha at anywhere between 6 and 8 years old, and that the Uzumaki Massacre happened right after she migrated. Now, rather interestingly, if we are assuming that Minato came from Tanigakure, that would mean that Minato's story shares some eerie resemblances to his future wife. See, because like we've already established, 30 years prior to the events of Naruto, Tanigakure and Konoha signed a ceasefire. Now, that's kind of interesting because most timelines of Naruto say that the First Great Shinobi World War ended about 6 years prior to Minato and Kushina's birth. That is to say that the First Great Shinobi World War ended 30 years before Naruto was born, so 42 years prior to the events of Naruto. So this means that in some capacity, Tanigakure and Konoha were involved in a war we know nothing about. A war that took place between the First and Second Great Shinobi World Wars, which means that in some sense, Konoha and Tanigakure were evenly matched, to the point where the two of them decided that a ceasefire was the best way of moving forward. Konoha couldn't defeat Tanigakure, Tanigakure couldn't defeat Konoha, and thus a truce was called. But how would Tanigakure, this tiny country with a tiny hidden village, possibly stand up to the might of Konoha? Well, the answer could lie in the fact that there was a clan from Tanigakure that held a crazy amount of power, a clan that would be able to produce a genius of Minato's level. However, Tanigakure's time in the sun of standing up to Konoha didn't last very long, because 2 weeks after they signed the ceasefire with Konoha, they were on the receiving end of a surprise raid from a village known as Kagero Village. And Kagero Village killed every single person inside of Tanigakure, except for one sole survivor, whose name was Geno. And this sole survivor of Tanigakure was only the sole survivor of Tanigakure because he wasn't in the village during the massacre. Now, if that story sounds eerily familiar to any of you, I'll wait and hear who it could possibly draw some ties to, but to me, it sounds like Kushina's story, to a T. But what if Geno was not the sole survivor of Tanigakure? Now, rather interestingly, this ceasefire being signed 30 years prior to the events of Naruto means that this ceasefire and the eradication of Tanigakure happened when Minato was 6 years old, which also just so happens to be the age at which children join the Shinobi Academy. But that is to say that there is a 6-year overlap where both Minato and Tanigakure existed. But Nick, if you're saying that Minato was born in Tanigakure, how could he have possibly ended up in Konoha? Yeah, sure, Tanigakure and Minato coexisted for 6 years, but if Minato was born in Tanigakure and Tanigakure was at war with Konoha, how would Minato, who was born in a warring country, end up in the Shinobi Academy of the country that his home country was at war with? And to that, I say the real important overlap in this entire story is those 2 weeks after the ceasefire was signed. See, does it make sense to you that Tanigakure Village, a village that was apparently able to stand up to the likes of the Land of Fire, 2 weeks after the signing of a ceasefire, fall to some random Kagero village? The only way that that makes any sense is one of two possibilities. Either the war against Konoha was so devastating to the military forces of Tanigakure that they basically had no army to fight back against Kagero village with, or a part of the ceasefire insisted that Tanigakure demilitarize and fall possibly under the military protection of Konoha. Either of these scenarios, however, would put Tanigakure in an incredibly disadvantageous situation to train young up-and-coming shinobi talent. And thus, what if after the ceasefire was signed, the Namikaze clan that existed in Tanigakure decided to send their children with promise to the shinobi academies of Konoha, a clearly greater military force? Not only would this work perfectly with how old Minato was at that time, it also draws a direct parallel to Kushina's story. In a show of good faith and collaboration between a smaller village in the Land of Fire, Minato, like Kushina, was sent to Konoha to bolster its potential future powers. This would also explain why Minato was so incredibly empathetic to what was going on with Kushina and her being bullied as the new kid in town. See, because while Minato seems well established in Konoha by the time that Kushina gets there, the upper age range of when Kushina gets to Konoha is 8. So in the hypothetical circumstance where Minato was sent to Konoha 2 weeks prior to the elimination of Tanigakure by the hands of Kagero Village, Minato could have been in Konoha for 2 whole years before Kushina got there. And considering the fact that Kakashi enrolled at the Shinobi Academy at 4, Might Guy enrolled at 5, and the standard amount of time that most kids spend in the Shinobi Academy is about 4 or so years, and we know that Minato graduated from the Shinobi Academy and became a genin at 10 years old, this would mean that Minato enrolling at the Shinobi Academy at 6 years old after being sent from Tanigakure would align with everything else we know about him and how the Shinobi Academy works. So the real reason that we never got to know the Namikaze clan or Naruto's grandparents on his father's side isn't because they don't care or they didn't know that he existed, but rather because Minato, like Kushina, was sent to Konoha as a way to bolster peace between a smaller village and a much more powerful entity. That the Namikaze clan was trying to sow their seeds into Konoha as a possible place to exist as a powerful clan. But between the war with Konoha and the sneak attack from Kagero Village just 2 weeks later, the Namikaze clan, like the Uzumaki clan, died with its village, making Minato and Geno the sole survivors of Tanigakure, a village so mighty that it was able to stand up to Konoha when all the other villages had an active ceasefire with it, meaning that Tanigakure was able to battle against Konoha one-on-one, while Konoha wasn't worried about any other foes. And if that doesn't speak to the potential power of that small village and the potential shinobi that existed within it, then I don't know what does. And quite honestly, I can't think of a better explanation for where Minato came from than that. From a country that borders the Land of Wind, is named after the ocean it touches, and Minato has the first name of ports when he comes from a country called the Land of Rivers that was destroyed when Minato was 6 years old, that happens to be the Shinobi Academy entrance age immediately after that country became friendly with Konoha, is enough evidence for me to say that not only is the Namikaze clan dead, but also that Minato comes from the Land of Rivers. I'm curious to hear from you guys. Do you believe this theory, or do you think there's other theories out there that explain Minato and the Namikaze's origins better? Tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's Buy and Tries Day, and these are looking kind of sad right now.